Hello, this is Native Solidarity News on CKUT 90.3 FM. I'm your host, Shelley, and today we have the honor of speaking with Oscar Dennis from the Tahltan Nation located up north near Terrace in British Columbia. Thank you for speaking with us today, Oscar.
You're welcome.
Oscar is a spokesperson for an occupation led by Tahltan Elders of the Tahltan Council Office, which just yesterday entered its fourth week and is still going strong despite an injunction issued to legally oust them. On September 17th, 35 elders, frustrated with being marginalized from band, nation, and corporate decision-making, took over the Tahltan Band Office and demanded the resignation of Chief Jerry Asp, who they say has been selling their land and resources right out from under their feet. In addition to a recent deal with Nova Gold Mining Company that was conducted without proper consultation with the elders, protesters are fed up with the lack of accountability, transparency, and nepotism that seems to plague band council politics. A January 27th press release said, "This day will go down in Tahltan history as the day the elders took back their power." I was very moved by this statement. And Oscar, I'm wondering if you can describe for us what it felt like that day, taking over the band council office, and some of the circumstances that led up to the occupation.
Okay, well, first of all, I think you said September 17th rather than January 17th. How it felt that day? Oh, well, it was kind of nerve-wracking because, the first step was always kind of scary, and there has always been retribution and no accountability, and the government has never supported the people. They're always behind the Indian Act councils.
Yeah.
So therefore, it was kind of scary, like after years and years, like decades of going through oppression and then having to finally stand up. It's not something easy. Mm-hmm. And I give the elders a lot of credit for their courage. So it was kind of nerve-wracking. It was a little scary to make the first step, but it was powerful as well. Going into their office, going into the protest and then participating in it, with all the elders, it was just awesome. It was powerful.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah.
And so what were some of the circumstances that led to the occupation of the office? What was going on in the community?
Well, what was more or less going on, it was going on in the nation.
Okay.
Nova Gold, one of the companies that has property on Tahltan territory in the southwestern area of the Tahltan territory, they put up a $100,000 special assembly, they called it, in Dease Lake on Tahltan territory, in one of the communities. And at this assembly, they basically came to tell us their plans to exploit the resources off of our territory. And the elders and the people sat there and watched our leaders, our Indian Act leaders, participate fully with this industry. But prior to this meeting, like within the last year or so, Shell Canada moved into our territory, and they just came rolling in with all their equipment and drills, and no one knew a thing, including some of the band council members for Iskut Reservation, like the council there, the Iskut First Nations. Everyone started asking questions, like, what's happening in our territory? Why is this industry moving in and we know nothing about it? So a lot of this happened in September, late August and early September. So everybody got up in arms and everyone started talking. Why is industry moving in without our knowledge? And then all of a sudden we heard that Todigan Red Chris was moving into the area as well. So and then we heard Fortune Mineral was doing that Mount Clapan coal project. And all of a sudden there's all this stuff happening and none of us knew anything about it because there was no communication between the leadership and the people. So on January 8th and 9th, Nova Gold put up $100,000 for the Tahltan Central Council to put together this special assembly. And at this special assembly, they brought in a lot of young Tahltan educated people to make presentations at it. It was like a workshop. And Nova Gold, after the Tahltans did their demonstration of their young educated team, Nova Gold, and I just got a phone call from one of the presenters there. She was a metallurgist. She studies mines and mineral. Anyway, she did a presentation and she phoned me today and she talked to me about what happened. And I was telling her how a lot of the Tahltan members and elders could see through this facade. Here was our leaders, our Indian Act leaders, promoting this awesome team that we have backing us, and here's the industry working with us and with our, experienced Aboriginal team, experienced in mining, etc. And they paid this money, and then they went away and they published it in their BC mining plan in Cornerstone 1 as the BC new approach to mining, the awesome relationship between First Nations, or specifically the Tahltan, and industry on our territory. In this BC mining plan, Cornerstone 1, Chief Jerry Asp is quoted as saying, we want to send a signal that the Tahltan people are in full support of mining on their land, and that's the furthest from the truth.
And were there voices of dissent at that meeting as well? And
there were voices of dissent, but every time someone tried to voice their opinion, Curtis Rattray, who is the president of the Tahltan Central Council, would intervene and says, well, this isn't a question for Nova Gold, it's a question for leadership. We can't be putting Nova Gold on the spot because they're here to present what's happening with their mine, not to answer questions that should be put towards the leaders. That could be done another time when we have another meeting with leadership and community. You see, but what they didn't say was, because this is considered consultation between industry and First Nations, because it was considered consultation, and you could see it. You could see that in the new BC mining plan. In the BC mining plan, we're used as the example of the new BC approach to mining. Awesome relations with First Nations, and so the elders seen all this happening. The BC plan didn't come out by then, but they seen this all happening. This was all unfolding before their eyes, and that was the last straw. So a week later, on the 16th, the elders they all went to their scheduled first, elders meeting. Yeah. And at this meeting, it was decided that they had enough. That we have to make a stand against these leaders that are, signing our land away without communicating with us, and we want to get rid of this, Chief Jerry Asp, because he's leading the whole thing. So they made their stand on the 17th. And what happened was they made their stand on the 17th, and the BC mining plan didn't come out until the 19th. And what's so beautiful about it is the chief didn't get in touch with, the province. I don't know what he thought, but protest was going on 2 days, and they had a chance to hold back their propaganda, but they did it out on January 19th, and now it's circulating to attract investors. Meanwhile, the chief couldn't even get into his band office for the 4th week now.
So did the media pick up on that? The fact that the province was making this announcement at the same time elders were occupying the office?
Well, the funny thing is, a lot of media picked up on it, but the two major television networks in Canada would not touch it. One being Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, CBC, and the other one being British Columbia Television. We've sent press releases to them, and we'd wait to watch the news to see if they'd cover it. There was no cameras up there. They didn't cover it. I'm not sure. I know CBC Radio covered it, but the media got a hold of it. And I got on a talk show, and I forgot what talk show it was. It was the Bill Good Show. They had, I think it was on 20th or the 21st, 22nd of January. The Bill Good Show had the BC Minister of State for Mining on. And he was talking about this new BC mining plan, and I got through, and I asked him, I asked him if he was aware, in the wake of this new mining plan, that the Tahltan Band Office had a sit-in locking out Jerry Asp, who is the Canadian Aboriginal Mining Association Vice President. He couldn't even get into his own band office, and he said something like, yeah, we're aware of it, it's been in the media, but we can't get involved in local politics. And click, I got cut off. That was it.
So they don't want to talk about the conflict of interest?
Yeah, well, it's a major conflict of interest, and one of the things, before we get to that, one of the things, he couldn't talk about it because if his if Jerry Asp collapsed, the propaganda collapsed. The BC mining, propaganda, Cornerstone 1 falls. So they couldn't touch it, but one of the things, like you mentioned, the conflict of interest, there's a major conflict of interest that no one's being held accountable for. Within the Tahltan Nation, Chief Jerry Asp, who's assumed the role as the Grand Chief, speaking on behalf of my children, when he's basically the chief of the Tahltan Reservation, which is there's two bands in our nation. There's the Iskut First Nations, and there's the Tahltan First Nations. They're both reserves, and Jerry Asp has been elected as the chief of the Tahltan First Nations, not the Tahltan Nation, you see. So this person who's assumed the role as the Tahltan Nation chief, he's also the chief's operations director for TNDC, a corporation that's securing all the contracts in Tahltan territory, and he's also the vice president of CAMA, Canadian Aboriginal Mining Association. And with CAMA, there's a demand for him worldwide because his industry pays his way all over the world to make presentations to Indigenous people on the benefits of mining on traditional territory, and he's using our example. So here he is as a chief of the Tahltan Band, which, assuming the role as a Tahltan Nation, and this position has been reaffirmed by the government. Yeah. He's making these decisions on behalf of the nation that best serves the interests of his position for CAMA, and also that serves the interests for this corporation, Tahltan Nation Development Corporation. Major conflict of interest, and there's no accountability for it.
I read the mission statement of the Tahltan National Development Corporation, and it said creating industry from a way of life. Now, this sounds great. It sounds like, industry in the area should only be able to move forward if it respects the Tahltan way of life, right?
Well, talking about way of life, I couldn't see how it's tying in with our way of life. I mean, we have to face it now. Our way of life is based on a capitalist model, right? Yeah. So in a sense, it is our new way of life. One of the things that he talks about is he says mining has reduced our unemployment rate to 6%. Yeah. We have one mine on our territory, and it's reduced our unemployment rate to 6%, which is below the national average. And the elders are saying, we're not saying no to development. We're not anti-development. We're saying we want controlled sustainability, meaning we want each one of these projects, if it's feasible, and it's not going to impact our environment too much, we want each of them to be developed in sequence so we could perhaps sustain it. It's a non-sustainable resource. Mining is a non-sustainable resource, so it's an oxymoron to say sustainable mining. Mm-hmm. But what we want to do is we want to control it in a sustainable manner, meaning we want each development done in sequence so it could perhaps secure secure our economy for the next 7 generations or 200 years. And if these mines are going to impact our environment, say for instance Shell Canada is moving into the sacred headwaters of the Skeena, the Nass, the Belle-Urban, the Stikine, through the Spatsizi, and the Iskoot. I mean, here's this major toxic development is going to be ahead of all these waterways. And on the Skeena is occupied, on the lower end of the Skeena is occupied by the Tsimshian Nation. The upper Skeena is occupied by the Gitsan Nation. And these people still, sustenance fishing is still a major part of their economy. So, if anything should go wrong, and even if it doesn't go wrong, the impact is going to be affecting 2 other nations. The Shell Canada development is also ahead of the Nass River, and the Nass, the Nishka, sustenance fishing is still a major part of their economy as well. So, the impact of this it goes beyond the Tahltan borders, right? Not to mention the Stikine River is, the Tahltan still uses Stikine River for sustenance fishing as well, and the Stikine River is an international waterway. It goes from Canada into the United States. So here's all this happening, and it's not working. It's not creating industry from a way of life. I mean, one of the things that's so harsh for a lot of the people to accept is the fact that here we are. The resources are ours. We've never ceded our land. We've never signed treaties. And our declaration states in the first stipulation we claim the sovereign rights to all the country of our tribe. And yet, a lot of our workers, a lot of our people are forced, to work in these mines at the lower end of the economic scale, right? Like right at the very end of the, in the labor positions, right? So they come out of there and they don't like it. Unfortunately, we must participate in it because we've changed to a capitalist system.
You told me the other day that the Tahltan Nation has a long history of extraction and trade in, I think you said it was called obsidian, the volcanic glass?
Obsidian. We had trade in obsidian. Before contact with Europeans, we were mining our resources. We were taking the obsidian, turning them into projectile points, and manufacturing. And we had what was called the ice mountain tradition. That's how it's designated by archaeologists. And we traded our obsidian far and wide. Canada and into the United States, and this was our economy. So we do have experience in resource development, but we did it on a sustainable basis.
Yeah,
And,
that seems like the major difference there. And I just want to clarify, the Shell projects, it's oil?
It's coal-based methane. So that's happening, Shell is in Tahltan territory now. They're meeting with the Tahltan, Indian Act leaders as we speak. I'm not as we speak, but I'm sure they're here this week. I know for a fact they're here this week. So they're meeting. Gary Ask was actually in Calgary, Alberta, meeting on behalf of the nation with Shell Canada when the sit-in began in Telegraph Creek. He was meeting on our behalf when the sit-in began, and then he comes back and he tries to write off the sit-in as, just elders being exploited by environmentalists and feminists and agitators from other tribes, And
Yeah, I read that in the Vancouver Sun today. That's just incredible to me that he could be so condescending to assume elders can't make decisions for themselves.
Yeah, he went so far as to say in one press release that the elders were being used as a bat to hit the leaders over the head with. I mean, he didn't give them any credit, any kind of intellectual credit. Even as if they were robots. And that's real disrespectful because our elders, they're our professors. They hold, all the knowledge. Just because we switched over to some European imposed curriculum, our elders are, being marginalized. All the information that they have are being lost because of this, imposed European value that's brought in through the Indian Act. So, and we want the elders. We've learned from the elders. I've lived with the elders. I've done sustenance fishing. I've done trapping. I've taken, I've participated in the traditional economy. I went to university and got a degree later on in my life, but as a child, I participated in our traditional economy. It was at least 50% traditional and 50% wage economy when I was a child. So, it's only recently that the wage economy has become a major part of our lives now. But it doesn't mean that our sustenance economy doesn't exist no more. It's still there. As an anthropologist, in hindsight, I look back at the band model government being imposed on us. I remember as a child, the government brought in the building. They set a building right in the center of our community, and it was just an empty building with a pool table inside of it, with one small little, maybe 12, maybe 8 by 6 room, enough to put a desk inside. And inside this band office, it was empty. Inside the whole structure, it was empty. They had a pool table, and guess what? All the men started to go and play pool. And it was a switch from a matrilineal system to a patrilineal leadership. So the men would go play pool, the chief would be amongst them, and then all of a sudden I noticed there was a desk because the young boys used to go over and hang out and watch the men play pool. Until we got bored, then we wandered off. But I noticed in this building there was an empty small little room that had enough for a desk, and all of a sudden I noticed there was a desk there. Then pretty soon there was, it went as far as a desk, and then then we used to have we have this movie night there as well. It never ever took off, and the next thing you know, they built another structure and they put a desk in there with a radio phone. And then pretty soon, they had another two pool tables put in there, and all the men gathered. And then pretty soon the office started to pick up files, and next thing you know, we had an office, and pretty soon it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally this imposed Indian band model just took over.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty covert operation, here in the East with the Kanukahaga Nation, the Mohawk Nation. They had people getting killed and jailed and all that kind of stuff when they tried to maintain their traditional system. But
it happened without. One of my uncles said it. He put it in a real beautiful way. He says, "You know what? He says, they took our territory without firing one shot.
Yeah.
He says, they took our mines first through residential school. He says, and then they took our territory without firing a shot. But, one of the things that really contributed to our demise was the European epidemic phase. So that wiped us out, and we were kind of, we were a strong nation at one time, but the epidemics kind of took care of that. And then they slowly moved in through the 70s. And then they brought television in the early 80s, Television is a major media, how do you put it? It really influenced the change, right?
Yeah.
So watching television, pretty soon we want to adopt this culture. But it doesn't mean that we have to give up our traditional ways. I mean, tradition doesn't mean we want to go back to bow and arrows. It means we want to maintain our our values and our principles, like we could participate in capitalism, but still maintain our environment and still protect our rivers, and we'll find a way. But they refuse to hear the elders. They refuse to listen to the elders. The elders have been called ridiculous. When I was standing there when Jerry Ants was presented with this document, he was saying, "This is ridiculous. This is foolish."
What was the document?
The document was demanding his resignation. I was a photographer there, and I was taking the pictures, and there was also someone on a video camera, but he was saying it was ridiculous and foolish.
So has that been the main demand, his resignation?
Yeah.
Are there other demands as well?
Well, yeah, like the first time when he first showed up at the office, at the sit-in, they just handed him his walking papers, and he was saying, "This is foolish," this is ridiculous, and going on, as if these leaders, these elders were foolish, and they were just saying, "Hey, there's a major conflict of interest in you, in our leadership. Yeah. You're the vice president for CAMA. You're the chief operations director for Tahltan Nation Development Corporation,
yeah.
And you're the Tahltan chief. There's a conflict. You're making decisions on the nation, for the nation, based on your interest in these two other areas. So therefore, we want you to relinquish your position as a chief, nothing more."
Yeah.
But he couldn't. He couldn't release his position because that position guarantees, the security of his interest in these other areas.
Because I read as well that there was a demand for a financial audit.
There was a demand for a financial audit, and I've heard from pretty good sources from the elders. They were saying that the Tahltan Nation Board of Directors has requested a forensic audit of the Tahltan Nation Development Corporation, and I'm not sure what's become of that, if it's still ongoing, but that's happened, and so that's either happening, it's happened, or it's done, and we don't know the results yet.
What are the elders and others in support of the occupation, what are they proposing? If Chief Jerry Ants did resign, what would they propose for the future?
Well, they proposed leadership that would work with the people, leadership that would consult and communicate with the people, and have the people participate fully, in the decisions on our resources. And there's also people talking, elders talking that they want to clean. They said they need a major house cleaning, meaning all the nepotism and the family members that are occupying all the administrative positions and leadership roles in our nation to step down and be reassembled a whole new government based on appointed leadership. So therefore, if you're not doing your job, you're removed. Until we find people who would govern our nation under traditional laws and rules and values. So those are the demands. I mean, it just sounds like a big demand, but when you grow up traditionally on the land, it's a small demand. It's just saying, hey, let's just live honestly. To be some accountability for the wrongdoings, and let these people be held responsible for it. That's all the elders are asking. That's not such a big demand.
Yeah, I remember reading that the consultation offended the elders because all they did was tell their plans.
But that's not what consultation is from our perspective, but that's what consultation is as defined by industry and province.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at, like I have, the Mount Tahltan coal project is happening on my dad's family territory. So is Shell. They're both right on my dad's family territory. And for Mount Tahltan coal project, the environmental assessment report was sent into the British Columbia Environmental Assessment Office on September 2004, and they consider consultation 3 phone calls with Jerry Ants. I mean, it's written right into that assessment report, consultation, 3 phone calls with Jerry Ants, 1 in 2002, 1 in 2003, 1 in 2004, and the other part, the other one was, we contacted Louis, but due to a heart attack, he couldn't meet with us, so we left the information at the band office. That's consultation. Wow. It's written right in that assessment report.
Yeah, and that's a major problem when these corporations and government bodies are only consulting one person.
Yeah.
That's not a democracy, and that's Canadian democracy as well, but it's just like a problem of governance that... and this assessment report was done by Red Can and Fortune Coal Limited. Come on, give me a break, Fortune Coal doing the assessment. They're the ones that are going in there. Of course, they're going to be biased. Yeah. Red Can has also formed a joint venture with Tahltan Central Council. They
I think it was, I'm not quite sure of this, but I think it was Nova Gold that put up $3 million for the Tahltan Central Council to form an environmental corporation. And with this environmental corporation, they went into a joint venture with ResCan, and they're called RTEC now, ResCan Tahltan Environmental Corporation. So, and it just so happens that one of our councillors that sits on the district council, band council, is the head honcho in this environmental venture, that this corporation. So there's another conflict of interest right there.
Yeah, it's all very intricately connected.
It all has to do with money. It's unfortunate, but it's all capitalist, capitalist ideologies that run the whole thing. And capitalism is based on greed, because capitalism is profit.
Yeah. Profit before people, that's for sure.
Yeah, profit before people, and the more the merrier, So, capitalism breeds greed. It's unfortunate, that our leaders, a lot of them are traditionalists, but the money gets the best. When you buy yourself a $50,000 vehicle, and you finance the thing, and your children are driving around with $12,000 snowmobiles, and in the summer they have their $10,000 quads, and every family member has a vehicle. I mean, things start to change after a while, and you drive through the communities, you could see the children that are walking and the ones that are driving these machines, right? And you could, it's almost like you could see the division, the class structure that's taking place based on this new capitalist economy.
There was a few days ago a injunction. What's been happening with that, and what is the police response been so far?
Well, the police was at first. Jerry asked to call the police, and he tried to get the police to intimidate him, so he would get the police to go over and talk to them and try to open up a line of communication. And the elder just says there is no line of communication. He's no longer the chief. We have nothing to say to him, so we don't need a mediator to communicate. This is a peaceful demonstration. We do no longer recognize him as chief, so we don't need no communication link between us and Jerry asked. So he had the chief come by about the police office, RCMP, come by about 4 or 5 times, try to intimidate the elders, and then once the RCMP realized that it was just a peaceful, civil demonstration, they walked away and left it alone. So he went for a court injunction to have them removed. And because I was the cameraman there, and I was, I'm now the communications person, my name is also on the injunction. So he had this injunction, he got this injunction, and then he won't serve it. He doesn't want to serve it because, it'd be political suicide.
Yeah, it would be really bad.
Yeah, to have our elders being drug off, the premises by the RCMP. So he has the injunction, but he hasn't enforced it.
You mentioned the other day that Jerry Asp also took a position that you found quite embarrassing in the international arena.
Well, according to the elders, I was at the sit-in. They thought he went down to Guatemala. He's been traveling all over the world. He's been to China, he's been to England, he's been to, I think, Australia, he went to South America. Yeah. He went to Guatemala, and it just so happens that he went to Guatemala to promote industry, to promote, Tahltan relationship between industry and province, the advantages of participating in development in indigenous territory. And it just so happened that before he got there, the Guatemalan government, well, I'm not sure of this, but this is what the elders were saying, the Guatemalan government, killed 2 protesters. So here was our leader, representing the government's for development stand, area that, reeked with violence. And, so the elders were kind of embarrassed about that on an international level.
We have just been interviewed with Oscar Dennis, a Tahltan graduate at the University of Northern BC, with degrees in First Nation Studies and Anthropology. For more information on the current situation in the Tahltan Nation, you can contact Oscar Dennis by calling 250-234-3161 or by emailing him at oscardennis, which is 2 N's, oscardennis@hotmail.com. Another community voice during this occupation has been Terry Brown, and she can be reached at 250-235-3151 or by emailing Terry Brown, that's 2 R's, Terry Brown at hotmail.ca. This has been produced for Native Solidarity News. Back issues and subscriptions of Native Solidarity News are available at cost before exchange. Please visit the website to see our catalog at www.ckut.ca/MSN. To reach us by phone, please call the CKUT radio station at 514-398-6788. You can also send your comments or suggestions by email to nsm@ckut.ca. Do be in touch, because it's not solidarity